You hear the knocking before the shouting. It's July 1492. You're standing inside your family home in Toledo, clutching the only suitcase your mother could pack. Outside, horsemen patrol the streets. The cross on their uniforms glints in the sun. The order has arrived. Convert, leave, or die. Your family has lived in Spain for over 1,000 years. This is your land, your language, your history, but none of it matters now. Tens of thousands of Jews are being pushed into the streets, forced to abandon their homes, their shops, their livelihoods. Ports overflow with terrified families. Children cry as soldiers tear them from their belongings. The air reeks of smoke, sweat, and fear. Europe has decided it no longer wants you. But then, a rumor spreads across the docks, a whisper, a hope. Across the sea, an empire, powerful, wealthy, Muslim, has opened its gates, not to conquer you, not to convert you, but to save you. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire looked at Spain's expulsion of its Jews and said, "They have impoverished their own kingdom and enriched mine." Tonight, we enter the war that devoured a continent, not in glory, but in ash, madness, and the slow collapse of everything civilization claimed to protect. What you're witnessing isn't an isolated atrocity, it's a symptom. Across the German states, across Bohemia, across lands that once knew order, the same nightmare is unfolding. Villages burned, populations scattered, soldiers who no longer remember which flag they fight for, only that survival means taking everything from those who cannot resist. This isn't war as Europe once understood it. This is something else, something that will consume 8 million lives before it ends, something that will rewrite the rules of power, sovereignty, and human suffering. The year is 1618. Europe is about to tear itself apart, and no one, not kings, not generals, not God himself, will be able to stop it. May 23, 1618. A meeting room in Prague Castle. Protestant Bohemian nobles face 2 Catholic imperial governors sent by the Holy Roman Empire. The argument is about power, about religious freedom, about who gets to decide how people worship in this fractured patchwork of territories that barely holds together under the fiction of empire. The conversation escalates, voices rise, and then something breaks. The nobles seize the governors, they drag them to the window, and they throw them out. The men survive. The fall is broken by a dung heap below. But survival isn't the point. The point is what this act represents. You don't throw imperial officials from a window unless you've already decided that authority no longer applies, that the rules are void, that the old order is dead. This wasn't rebellion. This was a signal, a declaration that the fragile peace holding Central Europe together had finally shattered. The defenestration of Prague. Historians would give it a formal name, as if formality could contain what it unleashed. But in truth, this was the moment Europe's religious paranoia, its political fragmentation, its accumulated resentments reached critical mass. Within months, Bohemia would be an open revolt. Within a year, imperial armies would march. Within 2 years, Europe would be burning. And it wouldn't stop for 3 decades. To understand what happens next, you need to understand what Europe was in 1618. It wasn't stable. It was brittle. A collection of competing powers, held together by treaties that everyone knew would collapse under pressure. The Protestant Reformation had split Christianity into warring camps. Catholics and Protestants didn't just disagree. They viewed each other as existential threats, heretics who endangered souls, enemies who must be crushed or converted. The Peace of Augsburg in 1555 had tried to manage this by letting each prince choose his territory's religion. But it solved nothing. It just froze the conflict, storing tension like a compressed spring. The economy was already strained. Decades of inflation, failed harvests, plague outbreaks that swept through cities like clockwork. The Little Ice Age making winters harsher, summers unpredictable. Food shortages breeding desperation. And everywhere, mercenaries. Professional soldiers who fought for whoever paid. Men who saw war as a business opportunity, not a cause. They'd been accumulating for decades, waiting for the next contract, the next campaign. When Bohemia revolted, they finally got their chance. Europe wasn't ready for war, but war didn't care. It had found an opening, and it was about to metastasize into something no one anticipated. The first phase seemed containable. Bohemian Protestants versus Catholic imperial forces. Clear sides, clear objectives. The Battle of White Mountain in 1620 crushed the Bohemian revolt. It should have ended there. It didn't. Other powers saw opportunity. Denmark entered, claiming to defend Protestant interests. The Holy Roman Emperor needed more soldiers, so he turned to private contractors. Men like Ulbricht von Wallenstein, who raised entire armies as business ventures. Men like Johann Turklaus, Count of Tilly, whose forces operated with brutal efficiency. Here's what you need to understand about mercenary warfare. These men weren't fighting for ideology. They were fighting for profit, and profit came from plunder. Soldiers were often paid irregularly or not at all. They were expected to feed themselves from the territories they occupied, to take what they needed from civilians. This created a perverse incentive structure. The longer the war lasted, the more territory you could extract resources from. Peace meant unemployment. Stability meant bankruptcy. So the war became self-sustaining. Each army became a locust swarm that had to keep moving, keep consuming, or collapse. The conflict stopped being about religion. It stopped being about Bohemia. It became about survival, about which mercenary commanders could keep their armies fed, about which territories could be squeezed for one more season's worth of grain and livestock. And caught in the middle were the civilians. People who woke up one morning to find an army camped in their fields, who watched soldiers take their food, their animals, their daughters. Who learned that resistance meant execution and compliance meant slow starvation. You couldn't negotiate with this kind of war. You couldn't appease it. You could only endure it or die. May 1631, the city of Magdeburg, population 30,000, one of the largest cities in the German states, a Protestant stronghold that refused to surrender to imperial forces. Count Tilly's army besieges it, not for days, for months. The city holds, and that becomes a problem, because Tilly's soldiers haven't been paid. They're hungry, they're angry, and they're owed. When the walls finally break, what follows isn't battle, it's release. You're in the city when it happens. You hear the gates give way. You hear the roar of thousands of men who've been waiting for this moment. You run, but there's nowhere to run to. Every street is filling with soldiers. Every building becomes a trap. They take everything. Food, valuables, anything that can be carried. When there's nothing left to take, they burn it. When people resist, they kill them. When they don't resist, they kill them anyway. The massacre lasts for days. When it finally stops, 20,000 people are dead. The city is ash. Magdeburg becomes a word that means something new, the complete erasure of a place. And here's the thing that breaks your mind. This wasn't unique. Magdeburg was the worst, but it wasn't alone. Dozens of cities faced similar attacks. Hundreds of villages were erased so completely that their names vanished from maps. The war didn't just kill people, it deleted entire communities from existence. Sweden enters the war under King Gustavus Adolphus. Officially, he's defending Protestant interests. Actually, he's securing Sweden's position in the Baltic and preventing Habsburg dominance. His army is disciplined, well-supplied, modern. He wins victories. Then he dies at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, and Sweden continues fighting anyway because withdrawing means losing everything invested. France enters in 1635. Catholic France supporting Protestant forces against Catholic Habsburgs. Why? Because Cardinal Richelieu understands that this stopped being about religion years ago. This is about power, about preventing Habsburg Spain and Habsburg Austria from encircling France, about ensuring no single power can dominate Europe. Spain sends forces through the Spanish Netherlands. The Ottoman Empire applies pressure on Austria's eastern border, not enough to invade, but enough to force the emperor to split his attention. Every major power in Europe is now involved, either directly or through proxies. And in the center of it all, the German states are being systematically destroyed. The war has become Europe's meat grinder, a place where armies clash not over territory or ideology, but simply because the momentum of violence can't be stopped. No one remembers the original cause anymore. No one can articulate what victory would look like. They just keep fighting, because stopping would mean admitting that millions died for nothing. By the 1640s, the German states have lost between 30 and 40% of their population. In some regions, it's worse. Württemberg loses 3/4 of its people. Brandenburg, Pomerania, entire provinces are depopulated. Not just from war, but from the famine and disease that follow armies like shadows. The bubonic plague returns, carried by soldiers moving between camps. Typhus spreads through overcrowded refugee populations. Starvation weakens immune systems, making every disease deadlier. Villages that survived the initial violence die slowly from malnutrition and infection. Mercenary commanders become warlords, ruling devastated territories like feudal lords. They extract tribute from any community that still has resources. They fight each other over scraps. The war fragments into dozens of smaller conflicts, each one equally pointless, equally destructive. This isn't war anymore. This is system failure. The collapse of political authority, economic infrastructure, social cohesion. Europe isn't fighting a war, it's experiencing the breakdown of civilization itself. Survivors later describe a landscape of ghosts, forests reclaiming farmland, churches with no congregations, market towns with no markets. An entire generation growing up knowing nothing but violence and scarcity. The psychological damage is incalculable. Communities that had existed for centuries simply cease to exist. Cultural knowledge is lost. Trust in authority evaporates. The idea that life could be stable, that tomorrow might resemble today, gone. The Peace of Westphalia. Not because anyone won, because everyone was exhausted. Because there was nothing left to take. Because continuing meant total collapse. The negotiations took years. Every power wanted concessions. Every territory demanded recognition. The final treaties were thousands of pages long, addressing grievances that most people had forgotten the origins of. But Westphalia did something revolutionary. It established the principle of state sovereignty. The idea that each nation controlled its own territory without interference from outside powers. That religious authority belonged to states, not the Pope or the Emperor. That Europe would be a system of independent nations, not a unified Christendom. The Holy Roman Empire survived in name, but lost all real authority. Germany would remain fragmented for 2 more centuries. France emerged as the dominant continental power. Sweden gained territory. The Dutch Republic secured independence from Spain. But the real change was psychological. Europe had learned what total war looked like. What happened when conflicts weren't limited by feudal codes or religious restraint. when armies became self-sustaining machines of destruction that consumed everything in their path. They'd seen the future of warfare, and it was horrifying. The 30 Years' War killed approximately 8 million people, more than the English Civil War, more than the wars of religion in France, one of the deadliest conflicts in European history until the world wars of the 20th century. But the death toll doesn't capture what was lost. It doesn't measure the psychological scar, the knowledge that civilization was fragile, that order could collapse into chaos in a generation, that war didn't ennoble or purify, it simply destroyed. Europe would rebuild, but it would rebuild differently. With professional standing armies instead of mercenary contractors, with diplomatic systems designed to prevent total war, with the understanding that unchecked conflict led not to victory, but to mutual annihilation. The 30 Years' War didn't just kill millions. It rewired Europe's mind. It taught the continent what it was capable of doing to itself. And that lesson, that warning, shaped everything that came after. Some scars never heal. They just become part of the landscape, part of memory, part of the careful calculations that prevent history from repeating exactly as it did before. If you want to keep exploring the hidden scars history left behind, stay with us here on Beyond the Ages.